What if the one person warning you about a betrayal so big it could destroy your entire life was a 6-year-old girl hiding in the backseat of your car? That's exactly what happened to Michael Callahan on a rainy night in Savannah. She knew his name, his routines, and the exact day his world was set to collapse. She also knew the names of the people behind it, people Mike trusted more than anyone. But how could a child know so much? And why was she risking everything to tell him? As Mike would soon discover, this little girl wasn't just a bystander. She held the key to a conspiracy powerful enough to ruin him or save him, depending on whether he listened in time. Stay with me, because what started as a chance encounter would end in a way no one saw coming. The drizzle had just begun to gloss the cobblestones when Mike Callahan stepped out of the Seaside Heritage Inn in Savannah. Inside, investors had toasted his vision with champagne. Outside, Savannah Bay sent its briny breath through the magnolia-lined streets, and the gas lamps along Riverfront Avenue burned soft gold. Mike loosened his tie and headed for his white Range Rover parked beneath a live oak. He liked this street because it was predictable, quiet, easy to control. Most of his life was built that way, until tonight. Halfway to the car, the air shifted. Not danger, exactly awareness. He clicked the fob, slid into the driver's seat, and inhaled leather and cedarwood. Then cold fingers pressed over his mouth. "Don't talk," a small voice whispered from the back seat. "They're listening." Mike's eyes darted to the rearview mirror. A girl no older than 6 emerged from the shadows. Tangled hair smudged cheeks, eyes too old for her face. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. "Sophie Bennett. Please, keep your voice down. They're out there. Who the people who want to hurt you? I heard them at the Bayline Seafood Depot. They said Thursday you'd be gone. They know your routines, your car, everything." Thursday, his meeting with new investors, a deal Ryan Cooper, his college friend and business partner, had helped set up. Melissa Grant, his trusted assistant, had arranged every detail. Mike studied her. "How do you know me? Last winter you gave me a sandwich and money. You didn't ask anything back. Nobody does that." Before he could answer, her gaze sharpened. "It's him." Under a street lamp stood a tall man in a raincoat, motionless, facing them. Even through mist, Mike felt the stare. "Drive," Sophie whispered. The man began walking, deliberate, unhurried, as Mike pulled away. He didn't chase. He just watched. Several blocks later, Mike asked, "Why warn me? Because you saw me when everyone else looked away." Her words stuck. He turned toward the marina, to a quiet cafe where voices could disappear into background noise. They'd barely settled into a booth when a familiar voice said, "Mike Callahan, Rachel Monroe, once a summer companion." Now a sheriff's deputy stood at the table, rain-beaded hair tucked back. "It's been a while," he said. Her eyes dropped to Sophie. "Who's this?" "She's with me," Mike said, surprising himself with the protectiveness in his tone. Rachel's gaze sharpened. "Something's wrong. You've got that look you get when you're holding half the story." Sophie leaned into Mike. "Can we trust her?" "Yes," he said, meeting Rachel's eyes. So he told her Sophie in his car, the warning, the name she'd overheard Ryan Melissa at the seafood depot. Rachel didn't interrupt, but when he said Ryan's name, her expression shifted. "He's been meeting privately at the Granville Club. Not the kind of company you want your name in." Mike's chest tightened. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because nothing stuck. And because you've always trusted him." Sophie wrapped both hands around her mug. "Sometimes the people closest make the deepest cuts." The waitress brought Sophie a slice of pie on the house. Sophie blinked like she'd forgotten what kindness tasted like. Rachel leaned in. "If you confront them now, they'll change the plan. You need proof. And a safe place for her." Mike nodded toward Sophie. "Where Mrs. Parker's inn." Discretion is her love language. They left under a steady rain. At the inn, Mrs. Parker, brisk and warm, gave them a room under another name. Upstairs, lavender and old books scented the air. Sophie stood by the bed, not getting in. "You're going back out there," she said. "I am. Promise me you'll be careful. I promise." She hesitated. "If you can't find proof, find good people." He left her in Mrs. Parker's care and drove through misty streets to Rachel's modest brick apartment. "If it comes to it," he asked when she let him in, "and I have to choose between the company and someone I care about, what would you say?" Rachel poured tea. "I'd tell you to remember who you are without your company. And if you don't know, You'd better find out before Thursday. Outside under a street lamp, the man in the raincoat stood still as stone, facing the night like he owned it. He wasn't chasing. He wanted to be seen. Mike set his tea down. Thursday, he murmured. Rachel's gaze was steady. Then we start tonight. Thanks for watching. Sorry for the interruption, but we hope you will help us improve our content in the future. If you were in Mike's place, would you confront Ryan and Melissa immediately, or stay quiet until you had undeniable proof? Morning in Savannah came wrapped in fog, thick enough to make the river vanish. Mike Callahan stood at his kitchen window, coffee cooling in his hand, watching the white shroud roll off the bay. He'd barely slept. Every time his eyes closed, he saw Sophie in the rearview mirror whispering, "They're out there." A text from Rachel cut through the quiet Granville Club again. Ryan, Melissa, same private room. No greeting, just the facts. 10 minutes later, she was in his kitchen, hair damp from the mist, eyes sharp. "They're accelerating," she said. "You don't book that room at the Granville unless you want something buried deep. Thursday's their deadline, and they're not wasting time." Mike's stomach tightened. "Then we hit them before they hit me." A small voice came from the doorway. "I know where to start." Sophie padded into the room, still wearing the oversized sweater Mrs. Parker had given her. "Bayline Seafood Depot. They keep papers there. I've seen boxes, files, stuff they don't take home." Mike glanced at Rachel. She gave a short nod. "We go. But we go quiet. If they know we've been there, Thursday becomes tomorrow." The drive to the marina was slow and deliberate. Savannah Bay's fog was heavier here, rolling over the docks in slow, pale waves. The scent of salt and damp rope hung thick in the air. They parked behind an abandoned bait shop. Rachel moved first, each footstep careful on the slick wooden planks. Sophie stayed between them, brushing Mike's coat now and then, like she was tethering him. The Bayline Seafood Depot rose from the mist, weathered and gray. Sophie pointed to a side door tangled in shrimp nets. "Lift and push," she whispered. "It won't squeak." Mike followed her instructions, the door giving just enough for them to slip inside. The air was cool, smelling of brine and machine oil. Nets and crates loomed around them in uneven towers. Sophie led them toward a small side room. Through the narrow gap of the door, Mike saw a table cluttered with documents, shipping invoices, contracts, and in the center, a thin folder with his name printed across the top. He stepped inside, heart pounding. The first page stopped him cold. Transfer of control, emergency clause activation, removal from operational duties. Rachel's voice was low and urgent. "We've got it. Move!" Footsteps echoed from the main floor. They slipped into the shadows just as two men appeared, one with a clipboard, the other speaking in low, clipped tones. Sophie gripped Mike's sleeve. "That's him, the man I saw before." They caught enough to hear Ryan's name, Melissa's name, and Thursday like it was the punchline of a cruel joke. Rachel urged them toward the side door. The fog outside wrapped around them like a shield as they hurried back to the Range Rover. Inside, Mike's hands tightened on the wheel. "It's worse than I thought. They've already written the ending." Rachel's gaze didn't waver. "Then we rewrite it." But the night had one more move. The next morning, Mrs. Parker called, her voice tight. "She's gone." Mike's chair scraped hard across the floor. "Sophie, she said she was going to read in her room. Bed's made. Bear's gone. Windows locked." His pulse kicked into overdrive. "I'm on my way." At the inn, Mrs. Parker handed him a folded scrap of paper. "They're taking me to the seafood depot. Be careful. They said you'll come." Rachel's voice in his head. If they wanted her gone, she wouldn't have had time to write a note. He scanned the room. On the windowsill, tucked under a chipped seashell, was a pencil sketch, 3 shrimp boats, their hull numbers drawn in careful detail. "She's telling me where to start," he muttered. He called Rachel. "Meet me at the Marina Diner in 15. 15 minutes later, they were moving along the far side of the pier, sticking to shadows. The 3 shrimp boats sat exactly as in Sophie's drawing, tied near a rusted chain-link fence. Beyond them, a single light spilled from the depot's side door. Rachel raised a hand. "This is where we slow down." Through a small clouded window, Mike saw Sophie sitting on a crate in the center of the room, talking to someone out of view. Then Ryan stepped into sight, leaning on a workbench, posture loose, but eyes sharp. Melissa paced nearby, her heels clicking on concrete. Rachel's voice was tight. "Not a kidnapping. It's theater. They want you to walk in and hear their script. Mike's jaw hardened. Then we changed the ending. They slipped in through the service dock, weaving between the stacks of netting. Sophie spotted him but stayed calm, her fingers brushing the seam of her sweater, a signal Mike knew. She'd hidden something. Ryan's voice was smooth. When he comes in, you tell him you've been safe here. That's all. Sophie's reply was steady. I'll tell him what I want. Mike stepped out of the shadows. Interesting rehearsal, Ryan. Ryan's smile flickered. Melissa's expression didn't. We thought you'd want to see your little friend is fine, she said, syrup over steel. She's fine with me, Mike said, moving closer. Not here. Melissa tilted her head. Thursday could be painless if you let it. Sophie met Mike's eyes, and in that look was both a warning and trust. Thursday's not going to happen the way you think it will, Mike said quietly. They left without a hand raised to stop them, but the weight of Ryan's and Melissa's eyes followed them all the way to the dock. Back in the Rover, Rachel finally spoke. They let us go because they think they've already won. Mike looked in the rearview mirror at Sophie. They think wrong. Her small smile was shadowed. Careful isn't enough. They know you trust them. That's what makes it dangerous. Rachel's voice was firm. Then we find something they can't talk their way out of. Sophie sat back. Then you should know I left my bear in there. Right where I was sitting. Mike met Rachel's eyes. Outside, the fog was closing in again. For the first time all day, the next move felt clear. If you were Mike, would you risk going back for the bear tonight or wait until morning night had settled over Savannah like a heavy velvet curtain? The streets were slick from a late rain, and the bay wind carried a restless edge. Mike Callahan sat in the driver's seat of the Range Rover headlights, off watching the faint light in the Bayline Seafood Depot flicker through the mist. Rachel was beside him, her voice low. We go in fast. Grab the bear. Get out. But Mike wasn't just thinking about the bear. He was thinking about what Sophie had hidden inside it. It wasn't just a comfort toy. It was a piece of the puzzle. They slipped out, moving along the pier in silence. Inside the depot was quiet, the smell of salt and damp rope heavy in the air. The crate where Sophie had sat earlier was still there, the small brown bear perched exactly where she'd left it. Mike grabbed it, heart pounding, and they retreated to the safety of the Rover before anyone appeared. Under the glow of the dashboard light, Rachel carefully slid open a seam in the bear's back. A small recorder slid into her palm. She pressed play. Ryan's voice filled the cabin, calm, confident, poisonous. Thursday, the board will remove him. The signatures are ready. Melissa will have the paperwork in hand. After that, Callahan's out and the contracts move through. Melissa's voice followed, smooth and cold. Once it's done, no one will question the numbers. He'll never see it coming. Rachel stopped the playback, her expression a mix of triumph and anger. This isn't just proof. This is a confession. The next morning, Mike and Rachel walked into the Granville Club for the Thursday board meeting. The mahogany-paneled room was full of polished smiles, the air thick with the scent of coffee and ambition. Ryan and Melissa were already there, papers neatly stacked, faces unreadable. Mike greeted them like nothing was wrong, even joked about the weather. He let the meeting begin as planned, letting Ryan walk the board through his emergency transition plan. Melissa handed out copies of the documents, every line perfectly legal on the surface, every word a knife. Then Mike leaned forward, his voice steady. Before we proceed, there's something I'd like everyone to hear. Rachel, standing at the back, pressed play. Ryan's voice filled the room again, this time, bouncing off the high ceilings and antique walls. Every word was a nail in their own coffin. Melissa's laugh, cold and certain, echoed like a verdict. By the time the recording ended, the silence in the room was electric. The chairman spoke first, his tone clipped. Mr. Cooper, Ms. Grant, I think you'd better leave. Ryan tried to speak, but the chairman cut him off. Now. They left without a word, the door closing behind them, with a final heavy thud. The rest of the meeting was a blur. The board moved to reaffirm Mike's leadership, citing the integrity and vision that had built the company in the first place. But for Mike, it wasn't about winning the vote. It was about something Sophie had said. Sometimes the people closest make the deepest cuts. That evening, Mike drove straight to Mrs. Parker's inn. Sophie was in the garden, sitting on a bench under a magnolia tree, the last light of the day catching in her hair. When she saw him, she ran to him without hesitation. You're okay, she said, relief flooding her voice. "So are you," he said, kneeling to meet her eyes. "We got them, Sophie. They won't be hurting anyone again." Rachel joined them, her usual sharpness softened. "And you," she told Sophie, "are one of the bravest kids I've ever met." Sophie smiled shyly. "I just didn't want to see someone good lose." Mike felt something shift in that moment. For years, his world had been about deals, contracts, and numbers. But standing there with Sophie and Rachel, he realized the real measure of wealth was the people who stood by you when everything else was stripped away. He made arrangements for Sophie to stay somewhere safe and stable, a foster home recommended by Rachel, with people who understood what it meant to protect. He promised her they'd see each other often. Weeks later, the company was running stronger than ever. The scandal had made headlines, but Mike had stayed silent about the details, letting the evidence speak for itself. One Saturday, he found himself back at the park where it had all begun. Sophie was there with her foster parents, laughing as she tried to fly a kite. When she saw him, she dropped the string and ran over, hugging him tight. "You kept your promise," she said. "So did you," he replied. And in that moment, Mike knew the truth. The company was safe, yes, but more importantly, so was the part of himself that Sophie had reminded him existed. The part that chose people over power, kindness over control. It wasn't the ending he had planned. It was better. Thanks for watching. Sorry for the interruption, but we hope you will help us improve our content in the future. What about you? How do you feel about Mike's choice to protect Sophie above all else? Do you think it was the right move? If you enjoyed this story, comment the number 100 down below. Tell me which country you're watching from, and don't forget to share this video so more people can experience it.